Hello there, quiet travelers. Tonight, we step into a different kind of story. Not the grand romance, not the immortal perspective, but the view from the edges. From a father's chair, from a small town kitchen, from the eyes of a man who sees everything and understands almost nothing. Charlie Swan's story of watching his daughter fall in love with something he can never quite name. I pour so much into these videos, and there are days where I question myself. But then I read one of your lovely comments and it keeps me going. I haven't reached my goal of 1,000 subscribers yet, but I'm still fighting for it. If you want to support a small creator who truly cares about what she makes, it would mean the world if you subscribed. Thank you. So, settle in. Let this grounded tale carry you gently into dreams where mystery lives alongside the ordinary, and love means trusting what you cannot know. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in January. Charlie Swan sat in his usual chair, the television playing some game he wasn't really watching, a half-eaten frozen dinner cooling on the tray beside him. The phone rang with its old-fashioned bell sound, and he reached for it without much thought, expecting the station or maybe Billy checking about fishing this weekend. Charlie. Renee's voice came through, bright and warm as Arizona sunshine. Everything Forks had never been. I hope I'm not interrupting dinner. No, Charlie said, muting the television. Just finishing up. Everything okay? There was a pause. The kind of pause that meant something significant was coming. And Charlie felt his cop instincts engage, despite this being his ex-wife. Despite this being personal rather than professional. It's about Bella, Renee said, and Charlie's hand tightened on the phone. Phil's gotten signed to a minor league team in Florida, AAA ball, which is amazing for him. Really amazing. But it means a lot of travel, a lot of time on the road, and I want to be with him, you know. I want to support his career. But Bella needs stability, Charlie finished, understanding immediately where this was going. School, friends, a home base. Exactly, Renee said, relief evident in her voice. And I know it's a lot to ask, Charlie. I know you've got your life there, your work, and Bella's almost grown now. She's got her own opinions about things. But I was thinking, maybe, if she wanted to, she could spend some time in Forks, finish high school there. It would just be a year and a half, and then she'll be off to college anyway. Charlie sat very still, processing this. Bella, his daughter, the little girl he'd seen for 2 weeks every summer until she was 14 and had politely asked if she could stay in Phoenix instead. The daughter he loved desperately but barely knew anymore, who'd grown from a child into a young woman through phone calls and awkward birthday cards and the occasional stiff photograph Renee sent at Christmas. Of course, Charlie heard himself say. Of course she can come here, if she wants to. Does she want to? Another pause. She's the one who suggested it, actually. She doesn't want to disrupt her mum's life. You know how she is. Always putting everyone else first. But I think she might actually be okay with it, Charlie. A change of scenery. Something different. They talked logistics after that. When Bella would arrive, what she'd need, the practical details that felt safer than the emotional weight of what was happening. Charlie's daughter was coming home. Coming to live with him in the house she'd only visited in summers long past. In the town she'd never shown much interest in. Leaving behind sunshine and her mother and everything familiar. After he hung up, Charlie sat in this chair for a long time, the television still muted, the frozen dinner forgotten. He looked around the small living room with new eyes, seeing it as Bella would see it. The worn furniture, the fishing magazine stacked on the coffee table, the general air of a man living alone, of a space functional but not warm, practical but not welcoming. He'd need to fix up her room. Get some new furniture, maybe. Something better than the ancient bed and mismatched dresser that had been there since she was small. Make it feel like a real room for a real teenager, not just a guest space for summer visits. Charlie stood up, suddenly energized by purpose. He grabbed his jacket and keys, headed for the door. The furniture store in Port Angeles would still be open for another hour if he drove fast. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Charlie bought a new bed, a desk, a bookshelf. He painted the room a soft purple because he vaguely remembered Bella liking purple when she was younger. He hung curtains Renee had sent years ago that he'd never gotten around to installing. He cleaned the house more thoroughly than he had in years, scrubbing bathrooms and vacuuming corners that had accumulated dust since forever. At the station, his fellow officers noticed the change. Spring cleaning in January, Chief, one of them joked, and Charlie had mumbled something about his daughter coming to stay, trying to ignore their knowing grins. The hardest part was the truck. Charlie had spotted it at Billy Black's place months ago. An old Chevy from the 1950s that Billy's late wife had driven. It was a beast of a vehicle, all rust-red metal and solid construction, the kind of truck that would last forever if you took care of it. More importantly, it was the kind of truck that would keep Bella safe. Nothing fragile or fast, nothing that could crumple in an accident. Billy had been willing to sell it for cheap, had even helped Charlie get it running properly again. They'd worked on it together in Billy's garage, Billy in his wheelchair directing while Charlie did the manual labor. And something about the ritual of it felt important. Preparing for his daughter, making sure she had what she needed. She's going to love it, Billy said, wiping grease from a wrench. Practical kid like Bella, she'll appreciate something solid. Charlie hoped he was right. He hoped Bella would see the truck as the gift it was meant to be, as his attempt to provide for her, to keep her safe, not as some embarrassing old rust bucket that would make her stick out at school. The day of Bella's arrival, Charlie woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. He made coffee, checked her room for the 100th time, straightened magazines that didn't need straightening. The flight from Phoenix landed at 4 in the afternoon, which meant he'd pick her up around 5, which meant they'd be home by 6, which meant dinner around 7. He'd bought groceries actual groceries instead of his usual frozen meals and canned soup. He had no idea what Bella liked to eat anymore, so he'd bought a bit of everything, hoping something would appeal. The drive to Port Angeles felt longer than usual. Every mile weighted with anticipation and anxiety. What would they talk about? What did you say to a daughter you barely knew anymore? Charlie rehearsed conversation topics in his head, discarding each as too forced, too awkward, too obviously an attempt to bridge a gap that had been widening for years. The airport was small, just a regional hub, and Charlie waited by the arrival gate, feeling conspicuous in his police uniform. He'd come straight from work, hadn't had time to change, and now he worried it made him seem too official, too cop-like, not enough like a father. Then Bella was there, walking through the arrival doors with her carry-on bag, and Charlie's breath caught. She'd grown. Of course, she'd grown. She was 17 now, but somehow seeing her in person drove it home in a way photos never had. She was tall, slender, her brown hair longer than he remembered. She looked like Renee, but there was something of his mother in her face too, a seriousness Renee had never had. "Dad," Bella said, and her smile was genuine, if a bit uncertain. "Hi." "Bella," Charlie managed, stepping forward awkwardly. Should he hug her, shake her hand? He settled for a brief one-armed embrace that she returned with equal awkwardness. "Good flight?" "Fine," Bella said. "Long, but fine." They collected her luggage, 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag, everything she was bringing to start her new life in Forks. Charlie loaded them into the cruiser, hyper-aware of Bella's silence, of the careful way she was looking around at the grey sky, the rain that had already started falling, the dramatic shift from Arizona's desert landscape. "So," Charlie said, as they pulled out of the airport parking lot, "I got you a truck." Bella's head turned sharply toward him. "You didn't have to do that, Dad. I could have walked to school, or taken the bus, or..." "It's nothing fancy," Charlie interrupted, feeling heat creep up his neck. "Billy Black had it sitting around, his late wife's truck. But it runs good, and it's safe, really safe. Tank of a thing. That's really great, Dad. Thank you." Charlie glanced at her, trying to read her expression, but she was looking out the window at the passing landscape. He wanted to tell her about the weeks he'd spent getting the truck road ready, about how Billy had helped him replace the battery and check all the fluids, about how he'd personally tested the brakes 3 times. But the words felt too large, too exposing, so he just drove. The house appeared through the rain and mist, small and brown and utterly ordinary. Charlie felt a flash of embarrassment at its modesty, at how plain it must seem to a girl who'd grown up in sunny Phoenix. But Bella just gathered her bags and followed him inside without comment. "Your room's upstairs," Charlie said, unnecessarily, since Bella had stayed here summers ago, knew the layout. "I, fixed it up a bit, got some new furniture." Bella climbed the stairs and Charlie followed, watching as she pushed open the door to her room. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the purple walls, the new bed with its simple quilt, the desk positioned under the window, the empty bookshelf waiting to be filled. "Dad, you didn't have to go to all this trouble." "Wasn't any trouble," Charlie said gruffly. "Wanted you to be comfortable." Bella set down her bags and turned to look at him, and for a moment, Charlie saw the little girl who'd visited summers ago, who'd followed him around asking endless questions about police work and fishing, and why Forks had so many trees. Then she smiled, and she was 17 again, nearly grown, but the warmth in her expression was the same. "Thank you," she said simply. "Really, it's perfect." Charlie nodded, not trusting his voice, and retreated downstairs to give her space to unpack and settle in. That first dinner was awkward, both of them trying too hard. Charlie had attempted to make spaghetti, something simple and universal, but he'd overcooked the pasta and the sauce was from a jar, and the whole meal felt like a metaphor for his parenting. Well-intentioned, but inadequate. Bella ate without complaint, even had seconds, and they made stilted conversation about her flight and the weather and her schedule for starting school on Monday. After dinner, Bella surprised him by doing the dishes without being asked. Charlie retreated to his chair, the television on low, listening to the sounds of his daughter moving around his kitchen. Their kitchen. The house felt different with her in it, smaller somehow, but also warmer, occupied, alive in ways it hadn't been since ever really. The next 2 days passed in a strange, domestic dance. Bella was polite, helpful, quiet. She cooked meals that were vastly better than anything Charlie had made in years. She cleaned up after herself, did her own laundry, asked permission before using the phone. She was the perfect house guest, which made Charlie's heart ache because she shouldn't have to be a guest in her father's home. He took her to the grocery store, let her pick out food she liked. He showed her around Forks, the tiny downtown with its handful of shops, the high school where she'd be starting Monday, the diner where he ate lunch most days. She took it all in with quiet observation, rarely commenting, just absorbing information like she was studying for a test. Sunday evening, the night before school started, Charlie found Bella sitting at the kitchen table with a map of the school building, planning her routes between classes. The sight of her being so methodical, so prepared, reminded him of himself before a shift. Maybe they had more in common than he thought. "You nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Bella looked up, startled. "A little. New school, new people, but it'll be fine." "You'll do great," Charlie said, with more confidence than he felt. "You're smart, responsible. Teachers will love you." Bella smiled slightly. "That's what Mom said too." An awkward pause. Renee's name hung between them, a reminder of their fractured family history, of choices made long ago that had led to this moment. Charlie cleared his throat. "I'm glad you're here, Bella. I know it's not what you wanted leaving Phoenix, but I'm glad." "I am too, Dad," Bella said, and Charlie thought she might actually mean it. "Really?" That night, lying in his own bed, Charlie stared at the ceiling and thought about fatherhood. He'd failed at it before, in the ways that mattered. Failed to fight harder for custody. Failed to visit more. Failed to be present in Bella's daily life. But she was here now, under his roof, and he had a chance to do better. To be the father she deserved, even if it was late. Even if he had no idea what he was doing. In the room down the hall, he could hear the small sounds of Bella settling in for sleep. The creak of her bed, the rustle of covers, the house adjusting to having 2 people in it instead of 1. Charlie closed his eyes and felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not quite happiness, not after all the years of absence and distance, but hope, maybe. The fragile hope that they might figure this out, might build something resembling a real relationship. His daughter was home, and Charlie Swan would do everything in his power to keep her safe, to give her what she needed to be worthy of the trust Renee had placed in him, even if he had no idea how, even if every conversation felt like navigating a minefield, even if he suspected he'd mess it up somehow. She was here, and that, for now, was enough. Bella's first week at Forks High School passed without incident, or at least without any incidents Charlie heard about. She came home each afternoon, made dinner, did homework at the kitchen table, while Charlie watched television or read the paper. They'd fallen into a comfortable routine, speaking when necessary but mostly existing in companionable silence. Charlie told himself this was fine, that teenage girls were supposed to be quiet and independent, that he shouldn't expect constant conversation. But something shifted in the second week, something Charlie couldn't quite name but felt nonetheless, the way he could feel weather changes in his bones before the rain started falling. It began with phone calls. Renee called every few days to check on Bella, and Charlie would hand over the phone and retreat to give them privacy. But he couldn't help noticing that Bella's voice sounded different during these conversations, lighter, more animated. She laughed more, her voice rising and falling with an enthusiasm he rarely heard when she talked to him. She's making friends, Charlie told himself, and felt pleased about it. Bella had mentioned a few girls at school, Jessica and Angela, had gone shopping with them once in Port Angeles. Having friends was good. It meant she was adjusting, settling in, finding her place in Forks. But then, one evening, Charlie overheard a name that made him pause while washing dishes. "Edward's really smart, Mom," Bella was saying, her voice drifting down from upstairs where she'd taken the cordless phone. "He's my lab partner in biology. We're studying mitosis this week, and he already knows everything. It's actually kind of annoying how smart he is." Edward. Charlie filed the name away without much thought. A lab partner, a classmate. Nothing unusual about that, except the name kept appearing. Edward said something funny in class. Edward helped her with a chemistry problem. Edward had recommended a book she was reading. Edward, with increasing frequency, until Charlie started to notice the pattern. He told himself not to read too much into it. Bella was 17. Of course she'd be interested in boys. That was normal, healthy even. Charlie had been prepared for this, in theory if not in practice. Some boy would eventually catch his daughter's attention, and as her father, his job was to be supportive, while also making it clear that any boy who wanted to date Bella would have to meet certain standards of respect and responsibility. In theory, it was simple. In practice, hearing his daughter's voice change when she talked about some kid named Edward made Charlie's protective instincts flare in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Who's this Edward kid?" he asked casually one evening over dinner, keeping his tone neutral, just a father making conversation. Bella looked up from her plate, a faint flush colouring her cheeks. "Just a guy at school. He's in my biology class." "One of the Cullens kids?" The flush deepened. "Yeah, Dr. Cullens' son. Well, foster son. He's nice." Charlie nodded slowly, processing this information. The Cullens. He knew of them, of course. Everyone in Forks knew of them. Dr. Carlisle Cullen had moved to town a few years back, taking a position at the hospital, and he'd brought with him his wife and a collection of adopted teenagers. 5 of them, if Charlie remembered correctly. Beautiful kids, all of them, in that unsettling way that made people do double takes. They kept to themselves mostly, polite but distant. Charlie had met Dr. Cullen a few times professionally, found him to be competent and courteous, if a bit formal. The kids attended school but didn't participate in much, didn't socialize with the other students. They were odd, people said. Too perfect, too aloof, too something. Billy Black had opinions about the Cullens, opinions rooted in Quileute legends that Charlie had never taken seriously. Old superstitions, old stories, nothing that belonged in the 21st century. Charlie had dismissed Billy's warnings as the kind of thing people said about anyone who was different, anyone who didn't quite fit in. But now, one of those Cullen kids was Bella's lab partner, and apparently nice, and clearly occupying more of her thoughts than a simple classmate should. Charlie told himself to let it go, to trust Bella's judgment, to not be the kind of father who interrogated his daughter about every friend she made. Then came the Monday that changed everything. Charlie was at the station when the call came through. Traffic accident at the high school, possible injuries, ambulance requested. He was in his cruiser and moving before dispatch finished the details, his heart already racing because Bella was at that school. And traffic accidents were unpredictable, and his cop brain was already running through worst-case scenarios. He arrived to controlled chaos. Students everywhere, teachers trying to maintain order. Tyler Crowley's van sitting at an impossible angle in the parking lot, its side completely caved in. Charlie's eyes swept the scene with professional efficiency, cataloguing details, looking for his daughter. He found her standing with the school nurse, apparently unharmed. Tyler Crowley on a stretcher nearby, being loaded into the ambulance. Relief flooded through Charlie so intensely, it made him momentarily dizzy. "Bella," he said, reaching aside, his hands automatically checking her for injuries, even as his eyes confirmed she was intact. "Are you okay? What happened?" "I'm fine, Dad," Bella said, but her voice was shaky, her face pale. "Tyler's van. It was sliding on the ice, and it was coming right at me. But I'm fine. I'm not hurt." Charlie looked from Bella to the van, trying to reconstruct the scene. The van had clearly lost control on the icy parking lot, had slid sideways across multiple parking spaces. Bella's truck was parked nearby, and Charlie could see how she would have been standing between vehicles when Tyler lost control. "How did you get out of the way?" Charlie asked, his cop mind already noting inconsistencies. The van had traveled a significant distance. Bella would have had to move fast, impossibly fast, to avoid being crushed. I moved. I don't know, Dad. It happened so fast." One of the students nearby, a kid Charlie recognized from around town, spoke up eagerly. "It was insane, Chief Swan. The van was going right for her, and then Edward Cullen came out of nowhere and pulled her out of the way. I saw it happen. He was on the other side of the parking lot, and then suddenly he was just there, and Bella was safe." Charlie's attention sharpened. Edward Cullen. Again. Where is he now? "He went in the ambulance with Tyler," the nurse said. "He hit his head when he pulled Bella out of the way, probably as a concussion. Dr. Cullen's meeting them at the hospital." The pieces didn't fit. Charlie had been a cop long enough to know when a story had holes, when the official explanation didn't match the physical evidence. The kid said Edward had been on the other side of the parking lot, but to reach Bella in time to pull her clear, he would have had to move at a speed that was simply not humanly possible. Charlie looked at Bella, really looked at her, and saw something in her expression. Not gratitude exactly, more like confusion, maybe even fear, quickly masked, but present nonetheless. "I want to talk to this Edward kid," Charlie said. At the hospital, Charlie found Tyler Crowley with minor injuries, mostly shaken up, already being released to his parents. But Edward Cullen was nowhere to be found. Dr. Cullen was there, impeccably dressed and professionally calm, and he assured Charlie that his son was fine. Just a small bump on the head, nothing to worry about. "He's resting," Dr. Cullen said smoothly. "I've examined him myself. No concussion, no serious injury. He'll be back at school tomorrow." Charlie wanted to push, wanted to insist on seeing the kid, on getting his statement about exactly what had happened. But Dr. Cullen was a respected physician, and his son was technically a minor, and Charlie had no legal grounds to demand an interview. The accident was just that, an accident. No crime had been committed. No one was seriously hurt. Still, the inconsistencies gnawed at him. That evening, Charlie tried to talk to Bella about it, but she shut down every attempt. "I don't really remember it clearly, Dad," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It happened too fast. I'm just glad no one was seriously hurt." "This Edward kid," Charlie pressed. "How did he get to you so fast?" "I don't know. Does it matter? He saved my life." "I'm just trying to understand what happened, Bella." "What happened is Tyler lost control of his van, and Edward pulled me out of the way, and now I'm fine, and Tyler's fine, and everyone's fine. Can we just drop it?" The edge in her voice told Charlie that pushing further would get him nowhere. But as a father and a cop, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was being left unsaid. Over the following days, Charlie noticed more changes. Bella seemed distracted, lost in thought. She'd stare out windows, her homework forgotten, clearly processing something heavy. And when Charlie asked if everything was okay, she'd paste on a smile and insist she was fine. The name Edward stopped appearing in her phone conversations with Renee, which Charlie found more concerning than if she'd kept mentioning him. Silence meant something was significant enough to hide. Then one evening, Charlie came home to find an unfamiliar car in his driveway. A Volvo, sleek and silver and expensive, the kind of car that stood out in Forks like a diamond in coal. He pulled up behind it, his cop instincts immediately wary. Inside the house, he found Bella and a boy at the kitchen table, textbooks spread between them, apparently studying. The boy stood as Charlie entered, and Charlie got his first real look at Edward Cullen. Beautiful was the word that came to mind, though Charlie immediately felt uncomfortable thinking it about a teenage boy. But there was no other word for it. Edward Cullen looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. All perfect features and styled bronze hair and clothes that probably cost more than Charlie's monthly mortgage payment. He was pale, unusually so, and there was something about his stillness that struck Charlie as odd. The kid stood too perfectly, moved too precisely, like every gesture was carefully calculated. "Chief Swan," Edward said, extending his hand with old-fashioned formality. "I'm Edward Cullen. I wanted to introduce myself properly, apologize for not being available at the hospital the other day." Charlie shook his hand and immediately registered how cold it was. Not cool, but genuinely cold, like the kid had been outside in winter without gloves. The grip was firm, maybe too firm, and Charlie found himself automatically assessing this boy the way he'd assess any potential threat. "Edward," Charlie said, keeping his voice neutral. "Bella's mentioned you." A slight smile crossed Edward's face, and his eyes flicked to Bella before returning to Charlie. "I hope favorably. We're lab partners in biology." "So I hear. And apparently you saved her life last week." "I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time," Edward said smoothly. "Anyone would have done the same." But Charlie had talked to enough witnesses to know that Edward hadn't been in the right place. He'd been across the parking lot. The story didn't make sense, and this kid's too perfect explanation only reinforced that something was off. "Well, we appreciate it," Charlie said, still studying Edward. "Bella's safety is my top priority." "Of course," Edward said. "Mine as well." The phrasing struck Charlie as odd. Why would Bella's safety be this kid's priority? They'd known each other for what, a few weeks? But before Charlie could pursue the thought, Edward was gathering his books, making polite excuses about needing to get home for dinner. Charlie walked him to the door, a territorial gesture he didn't fully examine. He watched Edward climb into the expensive Volvo, watched him drive away with a kind of precision that suggested a very experienced driver, not a 17-year-old kid. "He seems nice," Charlie said carefully when he returned to the kitchen. Bella was gathering the scattered textbooks, not looking at him. "He is nice. How long have you two been studying together?" "A couple weeks. He's helping me catch up in biology. I was behind when I transferred." It sounded reasonable. It sounded perfectly innocent. But Charlie's instincts were screaming that there was more to the story, that Bella wasn't telling him something important. That night, Charlie called Billy Black. "The Cullens," Charlie said, without preamble when Billy answered. "Tell me what you know about them." Billy was quiet for a long moment. "This about Bella. She's been spending time with one of them. Edward, the doctor's son." "Charlie, you know what I think about that family. I know you've got stories, old legends, but I need facts, Billy, not superstition." "Sometimes the old stories exist for a reason," Billy said carefully. "My grandfather's stories about the cold ones, about the treaty, they're not just fairy tales, Charlie." "Cold ones?" Charlie couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "Beings that don't belong here. Beings that are dangerous, especially to someone like Bella. Keep her away from them, Charlie, for her own safety." Charlie wanted to dismiss it, wanted to laugh it off as Billy taking old Quileute legends too seriously. But something in Billy's tone gave him pause. Billy Black was not a fanciful man. He didn't exaggerate or dramatize. If he was warning Charlie, he believed there was a real danger. "I'll keep an eye on the situation," Charlie said finally. "But Bella's 17, Billy. I can't lock her in her room. I can't forbid her from having friends. Just be careful," Billy said, "and call me if anything seems wrong. Promise me, Charlie." Charlie promised, though he wasn't sure what he was promising to watch for. The Volvo became a regular presence in Charlie's driveway. Edward Cullen became a regular presence in his house. Always polite, always proper, always leaving at a reasonable hour. Charlie couldn't find fault with the kid's behavior, couldn't point to any specific thing that was inappropriate or concerning. But the cold handshake haunted him. The too perfect manners haunted him. The way Edward looked at Bella, with an intensity that seemed far too serious for a high school crush, haunted him. And the way Bella looked at Edward haunted him most of all. Like the boy had become her entire world in the space of a few weeks. like nothing else mattered, like she was falling into something deep and dangerous and irreversible. Charlie lay awake at night, listening to the house settle around him, thinking about his daughter in the room down the hall. She was changing, pulling away, becoming someone he didn't quite recognize. Part of that was normal. Teenagers were supposed to become independent, supposed to develop their own lives separate from their parents. But this felt different. This felt like watching Bella walk toward a cliff edge while insisting everything was fine. And Charlie, for all his training and experience, for all his protective instincts and paternal love, had no idea how to pull her back from whatever precipice she was approaching. No idea how to protect her from a danger he couldn't name, couldn't prove, couldn't even fully articulate. All he could do was watch and worry and hope that his gut instinct was wrong, that Edward Cullen was just a strange but harmless kid, that Bella's infatuation would run its natural course and fade like teenage romances were supposed to fade. But deep down, in the part of himself that had kept him alive through years of police work, Charlie knew better. Something was happening to his daughter, something significant and possibly dangerous, and he was standing on the outside looking in, powerless to stop it. The day started normally enough. Bella mentioned over breakfast that she was going to Port Angeles with Jessica and Angela to help them shop for dresses for the spring dance. Something about prom being months away, but Jessica wanting to start looking early, which seemed excessive to Charlie. But he'd long ago stopped trying to understand teenage girl logic. "What time will you be home?" Charlie asked, reaching for his coffee. "I don't know. Dinner time. We'll probably eat there before driving back." "Call me when you're leaving Port Angeles," Charlie said, the automatic cop father response. "Let me know you're on the road safe." Bella nodded, already gathering her jacket and purse. "I will. See you tonight, Dad." Charlie watched her climb into the old truck, listened to the familiar rumble of its engine, and felt satisfied that at least she was in a vehicle that could withstand practically anything. The truck was ugly and loud but safe, and safe mattered more than style. He spent the day at the station working through paperwork, responding to a minor fender bender on the highway, dealing with the endless small dramas that constituted law enforcement in a town like Forks. Normal Saturday work, routine. Nothing that required his full attention, which meant his mind kept drifting to Bella in Port Angeles, hoping she was having fun, hoping she was being careful. The other officers noticed his distraction. Mark, one of the younger deputies, grinned at him over lunch. "Worried about Bella, Chief?" "She's in Port Angeles," Charlie said, as if that explained everything. "She's 17, Mark said. "She can handle a shopping trip." Charlie knew he was right. Knew he was probably being overprotective. But Bella had only been in Forks for a few months, only been driving the truck for a few weeks. Port Angeles was an hour away, unfamiliar territory, a city with its own dangers. It was a father's job to worry, especially a father who'd missed most of his daughter's childhood and was hyper-aware of every possible threat now that he finally had her under his roof. By 5 o'clock, Charlie was home, settling into his chair with a beer and the game on television. The Mariners were playing, though not well, and Charlie watched without much interest. He made himself a sandwich for dinner, checked his watch. 6 o'clock. Bella would probably eat around 7, be on the road by 8, home by 9. Perfectly reasonable timeline. The sandwich sat heavy in his stomach as he tried to focus on the game. The Mariners were down by 3 runs in the 6th inning, playing sloppy defense that would normally irritate him. But Charlie couldn't muster much interest. He kept checking his watch, doing the mental math. If Bella left Port Angeles by 8, she'd be home by 9. 9:30 at the latest if they hit traffic or stopped for gas. 7 o'clock came and went. Charlie told himself not to worry. Girls shopping, they probably lost track of time. They were having dinner now, laughing over mall food called pizza, or whatever teenagers ate. Bella would call when they were leaving. He tried to read the newspaper, found himself scanning the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing any of it. Set it aside, checked his watch again. 7:15, 8 o'clock. Charlie's attention had shifted from the television to his watch, checking it every few minutes. Still no call. He tried Bella's cell phone, got her voicemail. Probably in a restaurant where she couldn't hear it ringing. No reason to panic, but Charlie's cop brain was already cataloguing scenarios. Dead phone battery, lost track of time, car trouble. These were the innocent explanations, the reasonable ones, but underneath them lurked darker possibilities that Charlie tried to suppress. Accident on the highway, wrong turn into a dangerous neighborhood. Bad intentions from strangers in a city where no one knew her. 8:30. Charlie was on his feet now, pacing the living room, the game forgotten. He tried Bella's phone again, voicemail again, left a message, keeping his voice calm despite the tension creeping into his shoulders. Bella, it's Dad. Getting a little worried here. Call me when you get this. He called Jessica Stanley's house. Mrs. Stanley answered on the 3rd ring, sounding cheerful and unconcerned. Oh, hi, Chief Swan. Jessica got home about an hour ago. Charlie's stomach dropped. An hour ago? What about Bella? Well, Jessica said Bella wanted to go to a bookstore, so they split up. Jessica thought Bella was probably headed home separately. She's not there. No, Charlie said, fighting to keep his voice level. She's not here. Did Jessica say which bookstore? Where they split up? I don't think she mentioned it. Hold on, let me ask her. Charlie waited, his heart hammering, while Mrs. Stanley called for Jessica. He could hear muffled conversation in the background. Then Jessica's voice came on the line. Chief Swan. Bella wanted to find some bookstore. I don't remember the name. We were done shopping and Angela and I wanted to eat. But Bella said she'd catch up with us. That was like, I don't know, around 6. She said she'd meet us at the restaurant, but she never showed up. We figured she went home. You left her alone in Port Angeles. Charlie couldn't keep the edge from his voice. She said she wanted to look for a bookstore, Jessica said defensively. She's almost 18, Chief Swan. She can take care of herself. Charlie hung up, his mind already racing through possibilities. Bella had been alone in Port Angeles for over 2 hours. Anything could have happened. She could be lost, could have gotten turned around in an unfamiliar city. The truck could have broken down. She could have been in an accident, could be lying in a hospital somewhere while Charlie sat at home waiting for a call that would never come. He tried her cell again, voicemail. The sound of her recorded voice asking him to leave a message felt like mockery. 9 o'clock. Charlie called the Port Angeles Police Department, spoke to the desk sergeant, felt the familiar frustration of being on the other side of a missing person report, because that's what this was becoming in his mind, despite the rational part of his brain insisting it was too early, that Bella was probably fine, probably on her way home right now. "My daughter went to Port Angeles this afternoon," Charlie said, his cop voice steady, even as his father heart raced. "She was supposed to call when she was leaving. She hasn't called. She's not answering her phone, and I'm concerned." The sergeant was professional but not particularly alarmed. "How old is your daughter, Chief Swan?" 17. "And when did you last hear from her?" "This morning. She went with friends, but they came home hours ago. She stayed to look for a bookstore. She's been alone there since around 6 o'clock. And it's just after 9 now," the sergeant said. "That's not very long, Chief. Teenage girls, they lose track of time. She's probably browsing books, forgot to check her phone." Charlie wanted to argue, wanted to insist this was different, that Bella was responsible, that she wouldn't worry him like this. But he also knew how he'd respond if another father called with the same story. He'd say exactly what the Port Angeles sergeant was saying now. "Wait a bit longer, she'll probably turn up. If you see a 1950s Chevy truck, red, Washington plates," Charlie said, giving them Bella's license number. "That's her vehicle. If your officers spot it, I'd appreciate a call." "We'll keep an eye out," the sergeant promised. "But Chief, I'm sure she's fine. These things usually are." Usually. The word echoed in Charlie's mind after he hung up. Usually didn't account for the exceptions, the times when usual didn't apply, when the worst case scenario actually happened. Charlie resumed pacing, his phone clutched in his hand, checking it every 30 seconds to make sure he hadn't somehow missed a call. The house felt too quiet, too empty, the silence pressing in from all sides. He thought about getting in the cruiser, driving to Port Angeles himself, searching every street until he found her. But Port Angeles was a city of nearly 20,000 people, and without knowing where Bella had gone, where to even start looking, he'd be searching blind. 9:15, 9:20. Every minute stretched into an eternity. At 9:30, headlights swept across the living room window. Charlie was at the door before the truck's engine cut off, his relief so intense it made his knees weak. But relief immediately transformed into anger, the kind of anger that came from hours of terror, from imagining every horrible possibility, from the helplessness of waiting. Bella climbed out of the truck, and Charlie's cop eyes automatically catalogued her appearance. Pale, shaken, but unharmed. No visible injuries. Clothes intact. Hair disheveled, but not in a way that suggested violence. She was alive. She was whole. And Charlie wanted to simultaneously hug her and yell at her for putting him through hell. "Where have you been?" The words came out harsher than he'd intended, propelled by hours of fear. "I've been calling you for hours, Bella. Hours. Do you have any idea what I've been going through?" "I'm sorry, Dad," Bella said, and she did look genuinely contrite. "My phone died, and I lost track of time, and..." "Your phone died." Charlie heard the flatness in his own voice. "Jessica's been home for over 2 hours. Her mother said you wanted to go to a bookstore. Alone. In a city you barely know. I know I should have stayed with them. But I really wanted to find this one book and..." "What book?" Charlie demanded. "What book was so important you had to search for it alone instead of staying with your friends where you'd be safe?" Bella's expression shifted, became guarded in that way Charlie was learning to recognize. Just a book for school, for an essay I'm writing. It was a lie. Not a complete lie maybe, but not the full truth either. Charlie had interrogated enough suspects to know when someone was holding back, and his own daughter was definitely holding back. You didn't just worry me, Bella. You scared me. Do you have any idea what goes through a cop's head when his daughter is missing in a strange city? Do you know the statistics on young women who disappear? The things that can happen? I wasn't missing. I was just... Where did you have dinner? Charlie interrupted, his interrogation training kicking in automatically. Pin down the specifics. Find the holes in the story. Bella hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but Charlie caught it. That tiny pause before answering, the telltale sign of someone deciding what to say, how much to reveal. An Italian place. I don't remember the name. You don't remember the name of the restaurant you just ate at? It was small. I didn't really pay attention to the name. By yourself? You ate dinner alone. Another hesitation. Longer this time. Bella's eyes dropped to her feet, and Charlie felt his suspicions crystallize into certainty. Something had happened tonight. Something she didn't want to tell him. No, Bella said finally. I ran into Edward. He was in Port Angeles too. He gave me a ride home. And there it was. The piece that made no sense. That turned this from a story about a teenager losing track of time into something else entirely. Edward Cullen, appearing in Port Angeles at exactly the right moment, knowing somehow that Bella needed help. Edward was in Port Angeles, Charlie repeated, keeping his voice carefully neutral. That's quite a coincidence. Yeah, I guess. Lucky for me, since my phone was dead and I couldn't call you. What was he doing in Port Angeles? I don't know. Shopping, I think. Does it matter? It mattered. It mattered a great deal. Because Port Angeles was an hour from Forks, and the odds of randomly running into someone you knew in a city that size were astronomical. Unless it wasn't random. Unless Edward had known Bella was there. How did he know you needed a ride? Charlie pressed. How did he even find you? Bella's face closed off completely, that wall slamming down between them that Charlie was learning to hate. I don't know, Dad. Does it matter? He was there, and he helped me, and now I'm home safe. Isn't that what's important? What's important is understanding what happened tonight. You were alone in a strange city, unreachable for hours, and then Edward Cullen mysteriously appears and brings you home. I want to know how he found you, Bella. I want to know what happened during those hours you weren't answering your phone. Nothing happened, Bella said, her voice rising with frustration. I looked for a bookstore. I couldn't find it. I walked around for a while. I ran into Edward. We had dinner. He drove me home. That's it. That's the whole story. But it wasn't the whole story. Charlie could see it in her eyes, in the way she wouldn't meet his gaze, in the tension in her shoulders. She was lying, or at least omitting significant details, and Charlie had no way to force the truth from her. Go to bed, he said finally, defeated. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Bella fled upstairs without argument, and Charlie sank into his chair, his mind racing. Edward Cullen, again. Always Edward Cullen, appearing at impossible times, knowing impossible things, being exactly where Bella needed him to be. The van accident, now this. The pattern was undeniable, and Charlie's cop instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. He thought about calling the Port Angeles police back, asking them to check traffic cameras, trying to establish a timeline of where Edward had been tonight. But what would he say? That he suspected a teenage boy of what, exactly? Following his daughter, being too helpful. There was no crime here, nothing he could point to as evidence of wrongdoing. Around midnight, Charlie finally dragged himself to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. He lay in the dark, his mind churning through questions that had no answers. How had Edward known Bella was in Port Angeles? Charlie hadn't even known Bella was planning to separate from her friends. There was no way Edward could have known, unless he'd been following her, unless he'd been watching her. The thought made Charlie's blood run cold. Was Edward Cullens stalking his daughter? Was that why he always seemed to appear when she needed help? But if he was stalking her, why help her? Stalkers didn't save their victims from harm. The whole thing made no sense. Charlie rolled over, punched his pillow, tried to force his brain into silence, but Billy's warnings kept echoing in his mind. The cold ones, danger, old stories that supposedly weren't just stories. Tomorrow, Charlie decided. Tomorrow he'd try again to get answers. Tomorrow he'd sit Bella down and have a real conversation about Edward, about safety, about the importance of honesty between father and daughter. But deep down, Charlie suspected that tomorrow Bella would still guard her secrets, would still protect Edward Cullen, would still keep her father on the outside of whatever was happening in her life. And Charlie would have to accept it, because short of locking her in her room, there was nothing he could do to force the truth from a daughter who decided to keep it hidden. The Volvo became a permanent fixture in Charlie's driveway. Every day after school, there it sat, sleek and silver and expensive, announcing Edward Cullen's presence in Charlie's house like a flag planted in enemy territory. Charlie would pull up in the cruiser after his shift and see that car, and his jaw would tighten with an irritation he couldn't fully justify. Edward was always polite, always left at a reasonable hour, always called Charlie Sir, and shook his hand with that unnervingly cold grip. Always had his homework spread across the kitchen table with Bella's, the picture of innocent studying. Charlie couldn't point to anything specifically wrong with the boy's behavior, which somehow made it worse. "He's here again," Charlie said to Billy over the phone one evening, watching through the window as Edward and Bella sat together on the porch swing. "Every single day, Billy. What kind of teenage boy spends every afternoon studying?" "The kind who's not actually studying," Billy said darkly. "Charlie, I'm telling you, that family is bad news. Keep Bella away from them." "I can't just forbid her from seeing him without a reason. She's 17, not 7. If I come down too hard, she'll just sneak around." "Then find a reason," Billy said. "Look into them. You're a cop, Charlie. Investigate." After hanging up, Charlie sat in his chair and considered it. Investigating the Cullens felt like crossing a line, using his professional resources for personal concerns. But wasn't protecting his daughter the most important job he had? Wasn't it his responsibility to know who she was spending time with? The next day at the station, Charlie pulled up what records existed on the Cullen family. It didn't take long. Carlisle Cullen had impeccable credentials, medical licenses from multiple states, letters of recommendation from prestigious hospitals, no criminal record, no complaints, no red flags whatsoever. The kids were all foster children, adopted by Carlisle and his wife Esme over the years. Edward Cullen, born in 1918 according to his birth certificate, which had to be wrong because that would make him over 80 years old. Charlie stared at the date, assuming it was a typo. Probably meant 2018, though that would make Edward only 7, which was equally impossible. He checked the other Cullen kids. Similar inconsistencies in their paperwork, birth dates that didn't make sense, records that seemed authentic but had strange gaps. Nothing illegal exactly, but odd. Everything about the Cullens was odd. Charlie called the hospital, spoke to one of the nurses he knew casually. "What do you know about Dr. Cullen?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Brilliant doctor," she said immediately. "Best diagnostician we've ever had. A little cold, maybe, keeps to himself. But the patients love him." Alaska, where the Cullens had supposedly lived before Forks. Charlie made a note to check with Alaska authorities, see if there were any records there. But even as he thought it, he knew it was excessive. He was investigating a respected doctor because Charlie didn't like how cold his handshake was. At home that evening, Edward was there again, sitting at the kitchen table with Bella. They were reading together, Bella's head on Edward's shoulder, his arm around her waist. The intimacy of it made Charlie's stomach clench. "Homework?" Charlie asked, his voice coming out rougher than intended. They sprang apart, Bella's face flushing. "Just reading, Dad. Edward's letting me borrow some books." "What kind of books?" Charlie moved closer, saw the worn copy of Wuthering Heights on the table. Classic literature. Innocent enough. "I was telling Bella about the parallels between Heathcliff and Rochester," Edward said smoothly. "How both authors explored obsessive love through Gothic frameworks." Charlie had no idea what that meant, but it sounded educational. He grunted non-committally and retreated to his chair, hyper-aware of the two of them in his kitchen, their heads bent together over the book, their voices low and intimate. This was more than studying, more than friendship. They were together, really together, and it had happened so fast. Charlie felt like he'd missed crucial steps. One day, Bella was his quiet daughter settling into Forks, and the next, she was completely absorbed in Edward Cullen. "How serious is this?" Charlie asked Bella later, after Edward had left with his usual impeccable politeness. Bella was washing dishes, her back to him. "How serious is what?" "You and Edward, this relationship, or whatever it is." Her shoulders stiffened. "We're dating, Dad. That's what teenagers do. They date." "It seems pretty intense for dating. He's here every day. You two are constantly together. Is that a problem?" Bella turned to face him, her expression defensive. "I thought you wanted me to be happy in Forks. I thought you wanted me to make friends." "I do, but friends, Bella. Plural. Not just one boy who seems to take up all your time and attention." "Edward makes me happy," Bella said quietly. "Isn't that enough?" Charlie wanted to say no. That happiness at 17 shouldn't depend entirely on one person. That healthy relationships had balance and boundaries. But the look on Bella's face stopped him. She was happy, genuinely happy in ways she hadn't been when she first arrived. Could he really object to that? "Just be careful," Charlie said finally. "Don't lose yourself in this, Bella. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you." "I know," Bella said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe she was young at all. A few days later, Carlisle Cullen stopped by the station. Charlie looked up from his paperwork to find the doctor standing in his office doorway, looking concerned. "Chief Swan, do you have a moment?" "Of course, come in." Charlie gestured to a chair, his cop instincts immediately alert. Had something happened? Was this about Edward and Bella? Carlyle sat with the same unnatural grace his son possessed, every movement precise and controlled. "I wanted to speak with you about our children, Edward and Bella specifically. I'm listening. I understand you have concerns. As a father, I would too if my daughter were involved with someone I didn't know well." Carlyle's voice was measured, calm. "I want to assure you that Edward's intentions toward Bella are entirely honorable. He cares for her deeply." "They barely know each other," Charlie said. "They've been dating, a few weeks." "Sometimes connection happens quickly," Carlyle said. "I met my wife Esme and knew immediately she was important to me. Edward feels the same about Bella." The comparison bothered Charlie. Carlyle and Esme were adults who'd found each other. Edward and Bella were teenagers playing at something they didn't understand. "Edward's a good kid," Carlyle continued. "He'll protect Bella, keep her safe. You have my word on that." "Why would she need protecting?" Charlie asked, his cop senses tingling. "Is there something I should know about?" "Of course not," Carlyle said smoothly. "I only meant that Edward values her safety as much as you do, perhaps more given his feelings for her." After Carlyle left, Charlie sat at his desk, feeling manipulated, though he couldn't pinpoint how. The conversation had been perfectly reasonable, even reassuring, but something about it felt wrong, like Carlyle had been managing him, saying exactly what Charlie needed to hear without revealing anything real. That weekend, the Cullens invited Charlie to watch them play baseball. Or rather, Carlyle invited him, mentioning casually that the family played occasionally, and Charlie was welcome to join them if he was interested. "Baseball in this weather?" Charlie asked, looking out at the overcast sky. "We're used to the rain," Carlyle said. "It doesn't bother us." Charlie went, more out of curiosity about this strange family than actual interest in watching baseball. The Cullens had a clearing deep in the woods, miles from anywhere, accessible only by hiking trails. When Charlie arrived, the whole family was there. Carlyle, Esme, Edward, and the other kids Charlie recognized from school. Rosalie, Emmett, Alice, Jasper. They were beautiful, all of them. Inhumanly beautiful, with the same pale skin and graceful movements. They stood together in the clearing like models posing for a photograph, too perfect to be real. "Chief Swan," Esme greeted him warmly. "Thank you for coming. We've set up a spot for you to watch." The game itself was bizarre. They hit the ball impossibly far, ran with incredible speed, moved with coordination that seemed choreographed. Charlie watched, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Something was very wrong here, something he couldn't name but could feel in his bones. Bella sat beside him, watching Edward play with obvious adoration. "They're good, aren't they?" she said. "There's something," Charlie muttered. When thunder rumbled overhead, the Cullens seemed pleased rather than concerned. They played harder, faster, the crack of bat against ball echoing like gunshots. Charlie had never seen anything like it. Driving home afterward, Charlie couldn't shake the unease settling in his stomach. The Cullens weren't normal, that much was undeniable. But what were they? And what did it mean that his daughter was deeply, obviously in love with one of them? "Dad," Bella said quietly as they drove through the darkening forest. "I know they seem strange, the Cullens, but they're good people. I promise you that." "How do you know?" Charlie asked. "How can you be sure?" "I just know," Bella said, and the certainty in her voice frightened him more than anything else. That night, Charlie lay awake thinking about everything he'd seen and heard. The too perfect family, the impossible baseball game, Bella's absolute conviction that the Cullens were trustworthy despite all evidence of their strangeness. Billy's warnings echoed in his mind. Cold ones, danger, old stories. Charlie had spent his entire life being rational, dismissing superstition, trusting in what could be seen and proven. But rational thinking couldn't explain the Cullens, couldn't explain how Edward had found Bella in Port Angeles, couldn't explain the baseball game, or the cold handshakes, or the way they all moved like dancers trained in perfect synchronization. Something was happening to his daughter, something significant and possibly dangerous. And Charlie, for all his training and experience, had no idea how to protect her from it. All he could do was watch and worry and hope that Bella's certainty wasn't misplaced. Hope that whatever the Cullens were, they wouldn't hurt her. Hope that his daughter's first love wouldn't destroy her. But hope felt thin and inadequate against the growing dread in Charlie's gut that this situation was far beyond his understanding or control. It started on a Thursday evening in late March. Charlie came home from work to find Bella sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and her hands trembling as she stared at her phone. The house felt wrong, the air thick with tension he could feel the moment he walked through the door. "Bella, what's wrong?" She looked up, and Charlie saw something in her eyes that made his stomach drop. Fear. Real, genuine fear, the kind he'd seen in victims' faces too many times in his career. "It's Mom," Bella said, her voice shaking. "She's sick, really sick. She needs me to come to Phoenix." Charlie's cop instincts immediately engaged, cataloguing details. Bella's trembling hands, her pale face, the way she wouldn't quite meet his eyes. Something was off about this, but Renee being sick overrode his suspicions. "What's wrong with her?" did she say. "She didn't want to worry me," Bella said, standing up and moving toward the stairs. "But she needs me there, Dad. I have to go. Tonight." "Tonight?" "Bella, slow down. Let me call Renee, find out what's going on. Maybe I should come with you." "No." The word came out too sharp, too panicked. Bella caught herself, modulated her tone. "No, Dad. She specifically said just me. She doesn't want to make a big fuss. You know how she is." Charlie did know how Renee was. She downplayed problems, insisted she was fine when she wasn't, avoided doctors and hospitals whenever possible. But this felt wrong, rushed, like Bella was hiding something. "Let me at least help you pack. We can get you on a flight tomorrow morning, first thing." "I need to go tonight," Bella insisted, already halfway up the stairs. "I'll pack fast. Can you drive me to the airport?" Charlie followed her upstairs, watching as she threw clothes into a bag with no organization, no thought. This wasn't Bella's usual methodical approach to anything. She was panicking, moving on pure adrenaline, and Charlie's unease grew with every passing second. "Bella, talk to me. What exactly did Renee say?" "She said she needed me," Bella said, not looking at him. "That's all I need to know, Dad. She needs me, so I'm going." Within 30 minutes, Bella was packed and in the cruiser, her bag thrown haphazardly in the back. Charlie drove toward Port Angeles, his mind racing through everything that felt wrong about this situation. Bella's panic, her refusal to let him come along, The way she kept checking her phone like she was waiting for something. "Have you told Edward you're leaving?" Charlie asked, watching her reaction. Bella's face crumpled just for a moment before she controlled it. "We broke up." Charlie's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What? When?" "Earlier today. It doesn't matter. I need to focus on Mum right now." But it did matter. Everything about this mattered. Bella and Edward had been inseparable for weeks, completely absorbed in each other. And now suddenly they'd broken up and Bella was fleeing to Phoenix in a panic. The pieces didn't fit together. "Did something happen between you two? Did he hurt you?" "No, Dad. Nothing like that. We wanted different things. It's over. Can we please not talk about it?" Charlie wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but Bella's distress was palpable. She was holding herself together by sheer will, and Charlie sensed that pressing her would shatter whatever control she was maintaining. At the airport, Charlie walked her to the ticket counter, helped her book a last-minute flight to Phoenix. The price was outrageous, over $300 for a seat on a red-eye leaving in 2 hours, but Charlie didn't argue. If Renee was truly sick, if she truly needed Bella, then the money didn't matter. "Call me when you land," Charlie said, pulling Bella into a hug. She felt rigid in his arms, like she was holding her breath. "And call me after you see your mother. Let me know what's going on." "I will," Bella promised, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Charlie watched her disappear through security, that nagging feeling in his gut screaming that something was very wrong. But Renee was sick. Bella needed to be with her mother, and Charlie had to trust that his daughter was telling him the truth. The drive back to Forks felt endless. Charlie tried calling Renee from the road, got her voicemail, left a message asking her to call him back and let him know what was going on. Then he drove home to his empty house and tried not to imagine all the things that could be wrong with his ex-wife. Bella called around midnight to say she'd landed safely. Her voice sounded strained, exhausted, and Charlie heard traffic noise in the background. "How's your mom?" he asked. "I haven't seen her yet. I'm getting a cab to the house now. I'll call you tomorrow after I've talked to her, okay? I'm really tired, Dad." "Okay, get some rest. I love you, Bella." "Love you too," she said, and hung up before Charlie could say anything else. The next morning, Charlie called Renee's house. No answer. He tried her cell. No answer. He tried Bella's cell. Straight to voicemail. By noon, Charlie's cop instincts were screaming. He called Renee's house again, and this time she answered, sounding confused and concerned. "Charlie, is everything okay? I was going to ask you the same thing. How are you feeling?" "Feeling? I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be fine?" Cold dread settled in Charlie's stomach. "Renee, Bella flew out there last night. She said you were sick, that you needed her." "What?" "Charlie, I'm not sick. I haven't talked to Bella in 3 days. I thought she was with you." Charlie felt the world tilt underneath him. Bella had lied, had completely fabricated the story about Renee being sick, had fled to Phoenix under false pretenses, and now she was somewhere in Arizona, and Charlie had no idea where or why. "Renee, I need you to check your house. See if Bella's there. Call me back immediately." He hung up and immediately tried Bella's phone again. Voicemail. He tried texting. No response. His mind raced through possibilities, each darker than the last. Bella had lied to him, had manufactured an emergency to get to Phoenix. Why? What could possibly motivate her to deceive him so completely? Edward. It had to involve Edward somehow. The breakup that had seemed so sudden, Bella's panic, her insistence on leaving immediately. What if Edward hadn't broken up with her? What if she'd run from him? What if she was in danger? Renee called back within minutes, her voice tight with fear. Charlie, she's not here. She's not at the house. I don't know where she is. Did you check her old room? Maybe she's sleeping. I checked everywhere. Her room, the bathroom, the whole house. Charlie, where is our daughter? I don't know, Charlie admitted, the words like broken glass in his throat. But I'm going to find out. He called the Port Angeles airport, the Phoenix airport, used every professional contact he had to try to track Bella's movements. She'd landed in Phoenix, as she'd said. But after that, the trail went cold. No cab companies had a record of picking her up. She hadn't used her credit card anywhere Charlie could trace. His daughter had vanished into Phoenix, and Charlie was 1,000 miles away with no leads and no idea what to do. He called Billy Black, needing to talk to someone who might understand. It's the Cullens, Charlie said without preamble. This has something to do with them, with Edward. What happened? Billy's voice was sharp with concern. Charlie explained everything. Bella's sudden departure, the lie about Renee being sick, the breakup with Edward that had seemed so abrupt. She's in Phoenix somewhere, but I don't know where. And I think Edward Cullen is involved somehow. The whole family's gone, Billy said. I talked to a friend who works at the hospital. Dr. Cullen called in, said there was a family emergency. They all left town yesterday. Every single one of them. The information hit Charlie like a punch. The Cullens had left town the same day Bella fled to Phoenix. That couldn't be coincidence. I'm going to Phoenix, Charlie said. I'm getting on the next flight. Do that, Billy agreed. And Charlie, be careful. Whatever the Cullens are, they're dangerous. I've been trying to tell you that. Charlie booked a flight leaving in 3 hours, threw some clothes in a bag, and was headed for the door when his phone rang. Phoenix area code. His heart leaped. Bella. Dad. Her voice was small, frightened, and Charlie heard beeping in the background. Hospital sounds. Dad, I'm okay. I'm at the hospital, but I'm okay. What hospital? What happened? Bella, I'm coming down there right now. Good Samaritan Hospital. I had an accident, Dad. I fell. Down some stairs to the hotel. But I'm okay, really. Just some broken bones. Just some broken bones. Charlie felt his knees weaken, grabbed the door frame for support. What were you doing at a hotel? Bella, your mother's been frantic. I've been frantic. What the hell is going on? I'm sorry, Bella said, and she was crying now. I'm so sorry I lied. I needed to get away from Edward, from everything, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and I made stupid decisions, and I'm sorry. I'm on my way, Charlie said. I'll be there in a few hours. Don't go anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, Dad. I can barely move. The flight to Phoenix was torture. Charlie sat rigid in his seat, his mind cycling through every terrible possibility. Bella had fallen downstairs, at a hotel, after fleeing Forks under false pretenses, after breaking up with Edward Cullen, and the entire Cullen family had disappeared at the same time. None of it made sense. Charlie's cop brain insisted there was a story here he wasn't getting, a truth beneath the surface that would explain everything. But without more information, all he could do was imagine worst-case scenarios and pray that Bella was truly okay. Renee met him in the hospital, her face drawn with worry. She's on the 3rd floor, room 314. Charlie, she's pretty banged up. Broken leg, broken ribs, head trauma. The doctors say she'll recover, but it's bad. Charlie took the stairs too at a time, his heart hammering. Room 314. He pushed through the door and stopped, his breath catching at the sight of his daughter in the hospital bed. Bella looked small and broken, her leg in a cast elevated on pillows, her face bruised and bandaged. She was awake, her brown eyes finding his immediately, filling with tears. "Dad." Charlie crossed to her bedside, his hands hovering over her, wanting to touch her, but afraid of causing pain. "Bella." "Baby, what happened?" "I fell," she said, the story clearly rehearsed. "I was at a hotel, looking for the bathroom, and I fell down a stairwell. I hit my head and broke my leg and some ribs. It was stupid. I wasn't paying attention." "What hotel? What were you doing there?" "I was meeting a friend from my old school. We were going to hang out, but I never made it to her room." Lies. Charlie knew they were lies. Could see it in the way Bella wouldn't hold his gaze, in the tremor in her voice. But she was injured and in pain, and this wasn't the time to interrogate her. "The doctors say you'll make a full recovery," Charlie said instead, pulling a chair close to her bed. "That's all that matters right now." Edward Cullen appeared in the doorway an hour later, and Charlie's entire body tensed. The kid looked terrible, or at least his version of terrible. His perfect features were strained, his eyes dark with what might have been exhaustion, and he moved toward Bella's bed, like a man approaching an altar. "Edward," Bella breathed, her face transforming with relief and joy. "I thought you two broke up," Charlie said, his voice hard. "We did. We worked it out." Bella's hand reached for Edward's, and the boy took it with such tenderness that Charlie felt his anger deflate slightly. Whatever else was happening here, Edward's concern for Bella seemed genuine. Over the next few days, Charlie pieced together a story from fragments and overheard conversations. Bella had gone to Phoenix to get away from Edward. She'd stayed at a hotel. She'd fallen through a window, not downstairs. The injuries were severe but healing. She wanted to come home to Forks. None of it explained why the entire Cullen family had also been in Phoenix. None of it explained the too convenient timing. None of it made actual sense. But Bella was alive. That was what mattered. She was alive and healing, and insisting she wanted to return to Forks, to finish out the school year, to be home with Charlie. On the flight back to Washington, Bella fell asleep against Charlie's shoulder, her broken leg stretched awkwardly across 2 seats. Charlie watched her sleep and thought about all the questions he still had, all the answers he wasn't getting. Something had happened in Phoenix. Something involving Edward Cullen and his family. Something dangerous that had resulted in Bella being seriously injured. And she was protecting them, lying to keep Charlie from understanding what had really happened. As a cop, it drove him crazy. As a father, it terrified him. But Bella was alive and coming home. And for now, Charlie told himself that had to be enough. He'd keep watching, keep protecting her as best he could. And if the Cullens threatened her again, if Charlie caught even a hint of danger, he'd intervene regardless of what Bella wanted. His daughter's safety was worth any amount of her anger at his interference, worth any fight they might have, worth everything. The plane touched down in Seattle, and Charlie gently woke Bella to prepare for landing. She blinked up at him, still groggy from sleep and pain medication. "We're home," Charlie said softly. "Home," Bella repeated, and smiled despite her injuries. "Yeah, we are." The first week back in Forks was an exercise in domestic routine and careful watching. Charlie converted the living room into a temporary bedroom for Bella, moving the couch against the wall and setting up a bed where she could rest without having to navigate stairs. Her cast made mobility difficult, and the bruises covering her torso made even simple movements painful. She needed help with everything, and Charlie found himself grateful for the excuse to stay close, to monitor her recovery, to keep her safe within the walls of his house. Edward came by every day, always polite, always asking permission before entering. Charlie granted it, though the decision felt more like surrender than choice. Bella's face lit up when Edward appeared, her pain seeming to diminish in his presence. Whatever had happened in Phoenix, whatever danger she'd faced, hadn't diminished her feelings for the Cullen boy. If anything, they seemed stronger. Charlie watched them together with mixed feelings. Edward was attentive, gentle, treating Bella like she was made of glass. He read to her, brought her homework from school, kept her company for hours without seeming bored or restless. A better boyfriend than Charlie had any right to expect for his 17-year-old daughter. But the cold handshake remained, the two perfect manners, the way Edward moved with that unnatural grace, the way he never seemed to eat or drink anything when he was at the house. All the small wrongnesses that added up to something Charlie still couldn't name. "He really cares about her," Renee said during one of her daily phone calls to check on Bella's recovery. "I saw it in Phoenix, Charlie. The way he looked at her. That boy would do anything for our daughter." "That's what worries me," Charlie admitted. "It's too intense. They're too young for this level of attachment." "Were we any different?" Renee asked softly. "We got married at 18, Charlie. Young and in love and certain we'd found forever." "And look how that turned out," Charlie said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in his voice. "Sorry, I just worry about her." "I know, but sometimes we have to let them make their own choices, even when we're scared those choices might hurt them." After 2 weeks, Bella's doctor cleared her to return to school, though she'd need crutches for another month until the leg healed fully. Charlie drove her that first morning back, watching her maneuver awkwardly out of the cruiser with her backpack and crutches, Edward appearing instantly at her side to help. "I've got her, Chief Swan," Edward said, taking Bella's bag without asking. "I'll make sure she gets to all her classes safely." Charlie wanted to object, wanted to insist Bella didn't need a keeper, but watching her struggle with the crutches, seeing how easily Edward supported her weight while she found her balance, Charlie had to admit the help was necessary. "Thanks," Charlie said grudgingly. "Bella, call me if you need anything." "I will, Dad. Stop worrying." But Charlie couldn't stop worrying. It was his default state now, constant low-level anxiety about his daughter and the Cullen boy, and all the things that still didn't add up. Billy Black came by one evening in late April, rolling his wheelchair up the ramp Charlie had installed for Bella. They sat on the porch while Bella and Edward studied inside. Billy's presence, a reminder of warnings Charlie had been trying to ignore. "She's still seeing him," Billy observed, his tone carefully neutral. "She is. He's been good to her, Billy. Helps her with everything. I can't fault his behavior. His behavior isn't what I'm worried about." Billy looked through the window at where Edward and Bella sat together on the couch. It's what he is, Charlie. What they all are. And what is that exactly? Give me something concrete, Billy. Not legends or stories. Facts. Billy was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face troubled. Some things don't have facts the way you mean them. Some things you have to trust on faith, on instinct. Your instincts are telling you something's wrong with that family. I can see it. Why won't you listen? Because instinct isn't enough to separate my daughter from someone who makes her happy, Charlie said. I need proof, Billy. Evidence. Something I can point to and say, this is wrong, with certainty. By the time you have that kind of proof, it might be too late. The warning stayed with Charlie long after Billy left, echoing in his mind during the quiet hours when Bella was asleep and Charlie sat alone with his thoughts. May arrived with unusual sunshine rare for Forks, and talk at the high school turned to prom. Charlie heard about it from Bella during dinner one evening. Her casual mention that Edward had asked her to go. Prom, Charlie repeated, processing this development. You want to go to prom? Is that okay? I know my leg's still healing, but I can manage with the cast. Edward said we don't have to dance if I'm not comfortable. Charlie thought about prom, about his daughter in a formal dress, about Edward Cullen in a tuxedo, about an entire evening where Charlie would have no oversight, no way to ensure Bella's safety. What time does it start? He asked. 7. We'd probably leave here, around 6:30. And it ends when? Midnight officially, but Edward promised to have me home by 11. 11 o'clock. Charlie could live with 11 o'clock. It was reasonable, responsible even. And denying Bella prom because of his nebulous concerns about her boyfriend seemed cruel. Okay, Charlie said. You can go, but I want you home by 11, not a minute later. Bella's smile was worth the anxiety already building in Charlie's chest. The day of prom, Charlie came home from work to find the house in organized chaos. Renee had flown in to help Bella get ready, and the two of them had taken over the bathroom for the past 3 hours. Charlie retreated to his chair, listening to their laughter drift down from upstairs, feeling a bittersweet ache at how much he'd missed of Bella's life. When Bella finally emerged, Charlie's breath caught. She wore a deep blue dress that reminded him of Twilight, her hair styled in soft waves, her face glowing with happiness, despite the walking cast still on her leg. She looked grown up, beautiful, nothing like the awkward teenager who'd arrived in Forks just months ago. You look beautiful, Bella, Charlie managed, his voice rough. Thanks, Dad. Alice helped me find the dress. She has really good taste. Alice Cullen, another member of that strange family, now integrated into Bella's life. Charlie pushed the thought away, focused on this moment, on his daughter preparing for a normal teenage milestone. Edward arrived precisely at 6:30, emerging from the Volvo in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Charlie's monthly salary. The kid looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, all elegant lines and perfect grooming, and Charlie felt suddenly shabby in his work uniform. Chief Swan, Edward said, that formal politeness that never wavered. You have my word, I'll take excellent care of Bella tonight. See that you do, Charlie said, trying for stern, but probably landing somewhere near uncomfortable. He made them pose for pictures, Bella laughing as she balanced on her good leg while Edward supported her, their faces close together, obviously in love. Charlie snapped photo after photo, preserving this moment even as part of him wished he could stop time, could keep Bella safe and young and his forever. Have her home by 11, Charlie reminded Edward as they prepared to leave. Yes, sir, 11 o'clock exactly. Charlie watched them drive away, the Volvo disappearing into the evening, and felt the familiar helplessness of being a parent. You raised them, taught them, tried to protect them, and then you had to let them go and trust you'd done enough. Renee found him still standing on the porch, staring at the empty driveway. She'll be fine, Charlie, Renee said gently. Edward will keep her safe. That's what everyone keeps telling me, Charlie said. But nobody can tell me what she needs to be kept safe from. The evening passed slowly. Charlie tried to watch television, couldn't focus, tried to read, gave up after reading the same page 3 times. Renee made conversation, telling him about her life in Florida with Phil, about spring training and baseball and the heat she still wasn't used to. Charlie nodded and made appropriate responses while watching the clock. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 10:30. At exactly 11 o'clock, the Volvo pulled into the driveway. Charlie was at the door before the engine shut off, watching Edward help Bella out of the car with careful attention to her cast. Bella was glowing, happiness radiating from her like heat. Dad, it was perfect. The decorations were beautiful, and they played good music, and Edward's family was there, and they were all so nice. Did you dance? Charlie asked, focusing on the normal details, the safe topics. A little. Edward did all the work. I just held on and let him move me around, she laughed. I'm pretty sure I stepped on his feet about 50 times. I didn't mind, Edward said quietly, and the look he gave Bella made Charlie's chest tight. After Edward left, after Bella had changed into pajamas and settled on the couch with her leg elevated, Charlie sat with her in the quiet house. Did you have a good time? He asked. The best time, Dad. Thank you for letting me go. You look beautiful tonight. Your mom and I, we were proud of you. Bella smiled, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Bella. Charlie sat in his chair long after Bella fell asleep, watching her breathe, thinking about how much she'd changed since arriving in Forks. She'd come here quiet and uncertain, and she'd found friends and happiness and love. She'd also found danger and secrets, and a relationship with a boy who wasn't quite right. But she was happy. That counted for something. Maybe it counted for everything. Charlie didn't understand the Cullens, didn't trust them completely, didn't like how much influence they had over his daughter's life. But he also couldn't deny that Edward Cullen had kept his promises, had brought Bella home safely, had treated her with respect and care. Maybe that would have to be enough. Maybe Charlie would have to accept that there were things about his daughter's life he'd never fully understand, mysteries he'd never solve, dangers he couldn't protect her from because he couldn't even identify them. All he could do was be here, be present, be the safe harbor she could return to when the world became too much. As Charlie finally headed to bed, he paused at the living room doorway, looking back at Bella sleeping peacefully on the makeshift bed. His daughter, safe under his roof. That was what mattered. The rest, he'd have to trust to fate and hope and Bella's own judgment, even if it terrified him. Summer arrived in Forks with characteristic subtlety, the rain easing from constant to frequent, the temperature climbing into the high 60s on particularly ambitious days. Charlie's garden, neglected for years, suddenly had someone who cared about it. Bella spent hours outside when her cast finally came off in early June, pulling weeds and planting flowers with an enthusiasm that surprised him. Mom used to garden in Phoenix, Bella explained when Charlie asked about her sudden interest. I helped her sometimes. I thought it might be nice to have some color around here. Charlie watched from the porch as she worked, her movement still slightly cautious from the injuries that had only recently healed. She looked healthy now, the bruises faded, the limp barely noticeable. The physical evidence of Phoenix had disappeared, but Charlie knew the emotional scars ran deeper, hidden beneath Bella's smiles and assurances that everything was fine. Edward was there constantly, of course, helping Bella with the garden, reading to her in the afternoon shade, driving her to La Push Beach when the rare sunny days appeared. They were inseparable, a unit, so intertwined that Charlie had stopped thinking of them as separate people and started thinking of them as Bella and Edward, a single entity. It should have worried him more than it did. Probably would have, if he hadn't seen how happy Bella was, how settled. She stopped having the nightmares that had plagued her for weeks after Phoenix, the ones that had Charlie rushing to her room in the middle of the night to find her thrashing and calling out in her sleep. Edward's constant presence seemed to calm something in her, to provide an anchor she desperately needed. One evening in mid-June, Charlie sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sun make a rare appearance through the clouds. Bella and Edward were in the backyard, Edward reading aloud from some thick book while Bella weeded the flower bed. Their voices drifted to him in comfortable rhythm, Edward's smooth baritone and Bella's occasional laugh. Billy Black's truck pulled into the driveway, and Charlie felt his shoulders tense automatically. Billy had been persistent in his warnings about the Cullens, calling regularly to check on Bella, always asking pointed questions about Edward's presence in her life. Charlie, Billy greeted him, rolling his wheelchair to the base of the porch. Good to see you. Billy, beer? Sure. Charlie fetched another beer from the fridge, settled back into his chair. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, both watching Bella and Edward in the backyard. He's still here, Billy observed. Every day, all day, most days. And you're okay with that? Charlie took a long drink of his beer, considering the question. Was he okay with it? Not entirely. But was he going to fight it? No, not anymore. She's happy, Billy. I can't argue with that. Happiness isn't everything. Safety matters too. She's safe, Charlie said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. Edward's never hurt her, never given me a reason to think he would. What about Phoenix? Billy's voice was quiet but insistent. Something happened there. Charlie. Something that put Bella in the hospital with broken bones and head trauma. And that family was there when it happened. I know, Charlie admitted. I know the story doesn't make sense. I know there are pieces I'm not getting. But Bella won't talk about it, Billy. I've tried. She shuts down every time I bring it up. So you're just going to let it go. Accept that your daughter was seriously injured under mysterious circumstances and not push for answers. Charlie was quiet for a long moment, watching Edward help Bella to her feet, watching the way he supported her weight even though she didn't need the help anymore, watching the tenderness in every gesture. What choice do I have? Charlie said finally. I can interrogate her until she stops talking to me altogether. I can forbid her from seeing Edward and watch her sneak around behind my back. I can make myself the enemy and lose whatever relationship we've built. Or I can trust that she knows what she's doing, that she'll come to me if she needs help, and that sometimes a father has to let go even when every instinct is screaming at him to hold tighter. Billy was quiet, processing this. That's a hard choice. It's the only choice, Charlie said. She's almost 18, Billy. In a few months she'll be a legal adult. She could leave tomorrow if she wanted to, and I couldn't stop her. At least this way, she's here, she's safe, and she knows I'm here if she needs me. Even if she's involved with something dangerous. Even then. Especially then. Billy nodded slowly, something like understanding crossing his weathered face. You've thought about this a lot. Every day, Charlie admitted. Every single day I think about whether I'm doing the right thing, whether I should push harder, ask more questions, demand answers. But I also think about what I'd lose if I did. And Bella's trust, her presence in my life, that's worth more than answers to questions she's not ready to talk about. They finished their beers in silence, watching as Bella showed Edward something in the flower bed, both of them laughing at some private joke. Billy left with a final warning to be careful, to stay vigilant, but also with what seemed like grudging acceptance of Charlie's position. After Billy left, Charlie found himself thinking about fatherhood, about the impossibility of it really. You were supposed to protect your children from everything, keep them safe, shield them from pain and danger and heartbreak. But you were also supposed to let them grow, make their own choices, become independent people capable of navigating the world without you. How were you supposed to do both? How were you supposed to protect them while also letting them go? Charlie didn't have answers. He only had the choices he made each day, the small decisions that added up to a parenting philosophy he was creating on the fly. Trust Bella. Be present. Keep the door open. Don't push so hard that she runs. The next evening, Charlie worked up the courage to try again with the questions that still haunted him. Bella, he said over dinner, keeping his voice casual. I've been thinking about Phoenix, about what really happened there. Bella's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Dad, I told you. I fell through a window at the hotel. I know that's what you told me. But I'm a cop, Bella. I've investigated enough accidents to know when a story doesn't add up. The injuries you had, they weren't consistent with a simple fall. What are you saying? Bella's voice was guarded, defensive. I'm saying I know you're not telling me everything. I'm saying something happened in Phoenix, something involving Edward and his family, something dangerous. And I'm asking you, as your father, to trust me enough to tell me the truth. Bella set down her fork, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment, Charlie thought she might actually tell him, might finally let him in on whatever secret she'd been protecting. But then, her expression closed off, that wall slamming down between them. There's nothing to tell, Dad. I made a stupid decision. I got hurt, and I'm fine now. Can we please just drop it? I'm worried about you, Charlie pressed. The Cullens, they're not like other people, Bella. There's something different about them, something I can't quite put my finger on. And you're so involved with Edward, so completely absorbed in him and his family. I just want to make sure you're safe. I am safe, Bella said firmly. Edward would never hurt me. None of them would. They're good people, Dad. I know they seem strange, but they're good. How can you be so sure? Because I know them, Bella said. Better than you do, better than anyone in this town does. And I'm asking you to trust my judgment. Can you do that? Charlie looked at his daughter, at her earnest face and pleading eyes, and felt his resolve crumble. She was asking for trust, the most basic gift a parent could give a child. Who was he to deny her that? I do trust you, Charlie said quietly. I just wish you trusted me enough to tell me what's really going on. Someday, Bella said. Maybe someday I can explain everything, but not now. Now I just need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was all Charlie was going to get, and he recognized the futility of pushing further. That night, Charlie lay in bed thinking about conversations with other parents. He'd had lunch with a few other fathers from town the previous week, all of them complaining about their teenage children, the secrecy, the mood swings, the feeling of being shut out of their kids' lives. Every parent went through it, apparently. The gradual separation as children became adults, the painful process of letting go. Maybe what Charlie was experiencing with Bella wasn't unique to her relationship with Edward. Maybe it was just the normal progression of a daughter growing up, establishing independence, creating a life separate from her father. The Cullens added an unusual element, certainly, but underneath, perhaps it was just Bella becoming her own person. Charlie wanted to believe that, needed to believe it, really, because the alternative was driving himself crazy with suspicions he could neither prove nor dismiss. July brought Bella's 18th birthday, and Charlie threw her a small party at the house. Just family and close friends. Renee flew in again, and Billy came with his son Jacob, who'd grown impossibly tall since Charlie had last seen him. The Cullens were invited, of course, because excluding them would have been cruel and futile. Charlie watched Edward present Bella with a gift, some antique book she'd apparently been searching for, and watched her face light up with such pure joy that Charlie felt his throat tighten. Whatever else the Cullen kid was, he made Bella happy. He paid attention to what she wanted, what mattered to her, in ways that Charlie himself often failed to do. He's good for her, Renee said quietly, standing beside Charlie as they watched Bella unwrap gifts. I know you have your doubts, Charlie, but that boy loves our daughter, really loves her. I can see it. I know, Charlie admitted. That's what scares me. They're so young, Renee. What if it doesn't work out? What if she gets hurt? Then she gets hurt, and we help her pick up the pieces, Renee said. That's what parents do. We can't protect them from heartbreak, Charlie. We can only be there when it happens. Later that evening, after the party had ended and the guests had left, Charlie found Bella on the porch swing with Edward. They were sitting close together, Bella's head on Edward's shoulder, both of them looking out at the darkening sky. Charlie cleared his throat, and they separated slightly. Bella looking guilty for reasons Charlie couldn't quite understand. They'd been sitting, not doing anything inappropriate, but the intimacy of the moment clearly embarrassed her. Just wanted to make sure you had a good birthday, Charlie said. The best, Dad. Thank you for the party. You're welcome. Edward, thanks for coming, and for the book. She really seems to love it. It was my pleasure, Chief Swan, Edward said, with his usual impeccable politeness. Charlie retreated inside, giving them privacy, but he stood at the window watching them resume their previous position. Bella said something that made Edward laugh, and the sound was surprisingly warm, surprisingly human. Maybe the kid wasn't as alien as Charlie's instincts suggested. Maybe he was just a teenager in love, like millions of teenagers before him. August arrived with plans for the school year ahead. Bella would be a senior, her final year of high school. She'd started looking at colleges, though her choices seemed limited to universities in Washington state. Specifically, universities within a few hours of Forks. Charlie didn't need to ask why. She wanted to stay close to Edward, to the Cullens, to whatever life she'd built here. Part of Charlie was relieved. He'd feared she'd want to return to Arizona, to leave him behind again. But another part worried that she was limiting her options, restricting her future for a high school romance that might not last beyond graduation. "Have you thought about Arizona State?" Charlie asked one evening as Bella pored over college brochures at the kitchen table. "Your mom would love to have you closer." "I've thought about it," Bella said carefully, "but I think I want to stay in Washington. Maybe University of Washington or Washington State." "Because of Edward?" Bella looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "Partly, but also because I like it here, Dad. I like Forks. I like living with you. Is that okay?" The question caught Charlie off guard. Of course it was okay. More than okay. Having Bella choose to stay, choose him, was everything he'd hoped for when she first arrived. "It's more than okay," Charlie said, gruffly. "I'm glad you want to stay. Just make sure you're making choices for the right reasons. Don't limit yourself because of a boy, Bella. Even a boy you love." "I'm not," Bella insisted. "This is what I want, Dad. I promise." Charlie wanted to believe her. Chose to believe her really, because the alternative was unthinkable. As September approached and the new school year loomed, Charlie found himself settling into acceptance. Not comfortable acceptance exactly, more like resigned acknowledgement of realities he couldn't change. Bella loved Edward Cullen. Edward loved Bella. The Cullens were strange, but apparently harmless. Bella was happy and safe and choosing to stay in Forks. That was more than many parents got. More than Charlie had any right to expect after years of absence from his daughter's life. One evening in late August, Charlie sat in his usual chair while Bella and Edward studied at the kitchen table. The scene had become so familiar it barely registered anymore, just part of the daily routine like breakfast or the evening news. Edward was furniture now, a permanent fixture in the house, in Bella's life, in Charlie's consciousness. The house phone rang, and Charlie answered to find Harry Clearwater on the other end, inviting him fishing the next day. Charlie accepted, grateful for the excuse to do something normal, something that didn't involve worrying about his daughter and her mysterious boyfriend. After hanging up, Charlie realized Bella and Edward had stopped studying and were looking at him expectantly. "What?" Charlie asked. "You're going fishing with Harry," Bella said. "That's good, Dad. You should do that more often. Have fun with your friends." "I do have fun," Charlie protested. "You worry about me constantly," Bella said gently. "I can see it. But I'm okay, Dad. Really. You don't have to watch over me every second. It's a father's job to worry. I know. But maybe you could worry a little less. Enjoy life a little more." Charlie looked at his daughter, at her earnest face and caring eyes, and realized she was worried about him. Worried that his constant vigilance was costing him his own happiness, his own life. When had their roles reversed? When had Bella started being the one concerned about his well-being? "I'll try," Charlie said. "No promises, but I'll try." That night, lying in bed, Charlie thought about letting go. Really letting go. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. Accepting that Bella was growing up, making her own choices, living her own life. Accepting that he couldn't protect her from everything, couldn't shield her from pain or danger or heartbreak. Accepting that his job now was simply to be there, to be available, to be the safe harbor she could return to when she needed him. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating in a way. He'd spent months fighting against the inevitable, struggling against Bella's independence and her relationship with Edward. And all that fighting had accomplished nothing except creating tension and distance. Maybe it was time to try something different. Trust, acceptance, faith that Bella knew what she was doing, that she'd come to him if she needed help, that the choices she made were hers to make. Charlie closed his eyes and felt something release in his chest. A tension he'd been carrying for months, maybe years. The weight of trying to control what couldn't be controlled, of protecting against dangers he couldn't identify. His daughter was safe. She was happy. She was home. And she knew, because he told her every day in small ways and big ones, that he loved her. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any parent could really offer. In the darkness of his room, Charlie made a decision. He'd stop investigating the Cullens, stop questioning every detail of Bella's story, stop treating Edward like a suspect rather than his daughter's boyfriend. He'd be present, be watchful, but he'd also trust. Trust Bella's judgment. Trust that she knew what she was doing. Trust that she'd ask for help if she needed it. It wasn't surrender. It was acceptance. The recognition that his daughter was becoming an adult, and adults got to make their own choices, even choices their fathers didn't fully understand or approve of. The house settled into its nighttime quiet, and Charlie listened to the familiar sounds, the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through the trees outside, the distant sound of rain beginning to fall. And somewhere in this house, his daughter slept, safe and whole, and choosing to be here. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because love wasn't about controlling or protecting or preventing pain. Love was about being present, being available, being the constant even when everything else changed. Charlie had learned that lesson too late with Renee, had failed to be the husband she needed, the partner who could adapt and grow and change with her. But maybe he could succeed as Bella's father. Maybe he could be what she needed, even if what she needed was space and trust and the freedom to make her own mistakes. Sleep came easier than it had in months, and for the first time since Bella had arrived in Forks, Charlie dreamed peacefully. No nightmares about dangers he couldn't prevent. No anxiety about threats he couldn't identify. Just quiet dreams of fishing with Harry, of Bella's laughter, of his house full of life and light. Tomorrow he'd try again. Try to be the father Bella needed. Try to trust more and worry less. Try to accept the mysteries he couldn't solve and the questions that had no answers. It wouldn't be perfect. He'd still worry, still watch Edward Cullen with suspicious eyes, still wonder what had really happened in Phoenix. But he'd do it quietly, without letting it poison his relationship with Bella, without letting fear override love. That was the best Charlie could do. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. Charlie Swan had spent his entire life believing in things he could see, touch, prove, facts, evidence, the concrete reality of police work and small-town routines. But fatherhood had taught him something different, that love meant accepting mystery, that protection sometimes looked like letting go, that trust mattered more than understanding. He didn't know what the Cullens were, didn't understand the strangeness that surrounded them like fog, didn't comprehend what had really happened in Phoenix, or why Edward's hand was always so cold. There were questions without answers, mysteries without solutions, truths Bella kept locked away from him. And Charlie had made peace with that. Because every evening, Bella came home. Every morning, she smiled at breakfast. Every day, she chose to stay in Forks, in his house, in his life. She was safe and loved and happy, even if the foundation of that happiness remained incomprehensible to him. Some stories weren't meant to be fully understood by everyone. Some truths belonged only to those living, them. Charlie's role was simply to be present, to be steady, to be the father Bella could always return to, no matter what mysteries the world held. His daughter was home, and that was enough. Good night.